Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Good. Are there any problems left that we have to deal with?
No, we're free and clear.
Any new ones?
My garden is a problem because I don't have one.
Uh-oh. Well, good. So we'd like to always look for the better, and we will have a poll today. It says some people are moving in our direction. Sometimes the polls are doing better than what the government's doing. They don't read the polls.
Yeah.
They try to cover up on the polls where the people are waking up. But we're going to talk about a sort of a messy, sad situation. And even though it's not supposed to be involving us, it very much have. And who knows, somewhere along the way, we might have contributed to this one. And that is, there was a so-called whistleblower that got involved in, the death of a Russian prisoner, and that was Alexei Navalny.
Yeah.
And he's been around a bit, but up until now, I sort of, just accepted in a very superficial way. He spoke out against a dictator. You're not supposed to do that. And then when I started thinking about that, he was known, but not that well known, and there's controversy on his really current and past history on how dangerous he was to Putin. And then I got to thinking, well, Putin has over the years proven that he has some non-libertarian views, but I tell you what, he hasn't proven to me that he's the dumbest guy in the field of running countries. And for him to participate in this assassination because he said bad things about Putin is a little bit of stretch. And I think, but it looks like maybe somebody's benefiting about it. And that was my first question. Who benefits? Who's benefit? Why did he die? Who did this? Did Putin kill him to enhance his power in Russia? And I got to thinking, I don't think he's that dumb. But that's just an opinion because I don't have any idea. But anyway, the argument is up there for exactly why he did this. But there are some people who benefit. To me, and the reaction, the immediate reaction was, there, it proves it. It proves that we have to help the Ukrainians. Yeah. There's no other evidence. Even our president said so. I mean, if you can't believe your president, who are you going to believe in?
Yeah.
Big choice, right? So anyway, they seem to have benefit. Somebody that makes a lot of money off it, maybe gain power, but I just have trouble believing. So I fall back on the solution. What do you think? What do you think? I said, where's the autopsy? I want to see the autopsy. And it refreshed my memory about another time I wanted to see the autopsy. And that was back in 1963 during the Kennedy assassination. But there was an autopsy, and everybody said, oh yeah, Oswald did it with a single shot, and that was it. And it probably 90% of the people for a week believed it. Yeah. But it went from 90% believing it to maybe 90% questioning it right now. But so they got it out, and there were some benefits to this for somebody. And I think the conclusion of many was that maybe it had to do with the Vietnam War and some money-making machinery in the military that Kennedy wasn't going along with. But that they don't have the concrete evidence of that, but I happen to lean strongly in that direction because there's indirect evidence that shows that they were very hostile to Kennedy for that particular reason. So this is a big deal. Now, when the autopsy with Kennedy occurred, it happened quickly, but there was controversy the first week. But after the first week, they had to answer. Yeah. Single shot, Oswald did it, boom. And then they had a commission. LBJ puts up the commission. He put Alan Dulles on the commission to make sure it would be run honestly. So they run that through. Yeah, absolutely. One shot from Oswald, and that was it. And the American people gradually became disbelievers, didn't believe in that. And that went on, and there was a lot of talks and a lot of books written immediately. But the one person that got engaged in that was somebody I happen to have known a bit, because he was a pathologist, county commissioner, and a well-known political figure in Pittsburgh. And I was at the University of Pittsburgh at the time, and he would be an occasional lecturer there. So we got to know him because he was always got attention because he was considered very famous. So, you know, approximately 10 years after Kennedy was assassinated, he with, I think, about 12 other well-known, esteemed pathologists got together and to research all this. So they voted 11-1. Oh yeah, that was right. One shot, Oswald did it. And, you know, and as time went on, more and more Americans became skeptical. And it turns out that the immediate things are very often wrong. So what I say when they say, what do you think of this? I want the autopsy, and I want to find out who really benefits. And if they say silly stuff, like, Putin was out walking a bit. He had his pistol, so he did the job. He was responsible entirely, and I would have to see some evidence on that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack on this. First of all, in the West, Alexei Navalny is presented as a very important dissident. He was the one challenging Putin to the presidency. He was about to supplant Putin and take over the country. Whereas in reality, in any election in Russia, his party got about 2% of the vote. So in Russia, there's plenty of evidence that most people have never even heard of him. He's someone that the U.S. holds up as this great alternative. The same thing that they did with Syria. If you remember when they wanted to overthrow Assad, they pretended that there was a group that was going to take over. The same thing in Libya, the same thing in Iraq. They've always put the puppets forward that haven't done much. So, but he's been in prison for a while. He was charged with corruption and extremism. And a lot of people, I don't know if our viewers may have seen it, but not that we would support people being jailed for extremism, but in Russia, he said some things that are viewed as extreme against Muslims, and he's in jail for that, for part of it. But the idea, and you started out by saying this, Dr. Paul, and we did this when Assad was accused of gassing his own people, if you remember. And it was right when he'd had a couple of very important victories. And we were asking, well, why the heck would he do that? That doesn't make any sense. And so we don't know what happened in Russia. We don't know if Putin did it. Like you say, maybe he was out with his gun and decided he was bored. But we do know enough to ask the question, why would he do it now? Just weeks before the Russian election, why would he shoot someone that the West considers his chief opponent? A major victory in Ukraine over the weekend with the capture of Avdiivka, a big turning point in the war. I would say a massive PR boost from his interview with Tucker Carlson. And I suspect that's what infuriated the West the most. The fact that Putin came off after a 2-hour interview sounding kind of more reasonable than he was portrayed in the media. Whatever the case, a huge PR boost for Putin in the media. All of these things going in his favor, going in the right direction, and he decides to kill somebody who's in jail already for something like 25 years. It makes no sense, but of course it doesn't have to make sense in the U.S. mainstream media and among our politicos. We had Lindsey Graham trotting himself out there saying, we need to put Russia on the terror sponsoring list. I don't know who killed him, but we need to put him on the list. And this is on and on, and as you pointed out, and it's being used big time as an excuse. We got to get this money to Ukraine. We got to get the money to Ukraine, as if somehow they're even remotely related.
Sometimes it's all about oil. It's all about the money, too.
Yeah, show me the money.
You know, back to that Cyril Weck interview that he participated 10 years after Kennedy was shot. He did an investigation, and because of his reputation, they couldn't ignore him, even though they disagreed with him. So he was the first civilian to examine all the records from a scientific viewpoint. So all the evidence was turned over to him. And what he proved is it was gone.
Oh, wow.
Everything was gone. So that is something that tyrants do.
Yeah,
you know? So we'll have to see what happens. But I'll tell you what, this whole thing smells.
Yeah.
But it's very unpopular because right. But even though now it's getting, the way the people are lining up, some of the anti-Russian people aren't exactly saints.
Yeah,
They're out there with their things to be. But then again, some of them are leaving. There was one congresswoman was leaving Biden because she was sick and tired of being sympathetic to Russia.
Well, a lot of people are saying, well, how dare Putin's government, how dare they seek to jail their political opposition? We would never do that, would we? But there's another aspect to it I think that's very important, and a lot of people have pointed this out, including our good friends over at Zero Hedge. So put up that first clip. Now, this shouldn't be lost on anyone. The airwaves were blown up yesterday all weekend about Navalny's death. And again, we don't know what happened, but nevertheless, here's their headline. Weeks after U.S. journalist dies in Ukrainian custody, Biden uses Navalny's death to push for more Russian war funding. So Aaron Mateev, a friend of ours, excellent investigative journalist, he explains that despite news of Navalny's death in prison, driving world headlines and eliciting remembrances and comments from Western leaders, he was still largely unknown within Russian politics and society. He was a marginal figure in Russia, but nevertheless, he dominated the airwaves. Well, how different it was just a couple of weeks ago when Gonzalo Lira, an American journalist in Ukraine, was tortured and died in a Ukrainian jail. The U.S. said nothing. The administration said nothing. Put on that second clip. It remains that Gonzalo Lira's death on January 24th, following an 8-month imprisonment on charges of justifying Russia's military actions in Ukraine, is not useful to the Biden administration, writes Zero Hedge. Yet Biden, during his speech, was very quick to pivot from Navalny's plight to the need for Congress to push through his funding package for Ukraine. Now, next I have an interesting chart, and this came out yesterday. They compared the media coverage of the deaths of Gonzalo Lira, an American, versus Navalny. And you look, CNN, 0 mentions of Lira, 16 of Navalny. CBS News, 0 Gonzalo Lira, an American, 17 Navalny. NBC News, 0, 17. Wall Street Journal, 0, 7. New York Post, 1, 6. Newsweek, 1 Lira, 8 Navalny. New York Times, nothing. Not a word was written about American Gonzalo Lira killed in a Ukrainian jail, but 22 mentions of Navalny. Washington Post, 0. Keep it up, please. I'm trying to read it. 0 and 12. Bloomberg, 0 and 14. So literally the entirety of the mainstream media and the entire political class completely ignored something we actually should have a say about, which is an American getting killed overseas to the people we give so much money to, totally ignored. But Navalny, we don't know the circumstances, flooded with it.
Well, this whole mess, if we had a proper foreign policy, we would be messed up in the middle of all this. Because the question is about the money, and then who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, and then the people in this country who have to pay the bills, which they don't realize, are being taxed to send out this money, and who gets it? Oh, should we give it more to Russia, or should we give more to the Ukrainians? Yeah. Oh, Russia's the enemy.
That's right.
The Cold War is canceled, so we have to do it. But to me, it's still all about the money, and the Congress and all. They have to decide who should get it. The political thing in there. should we give it to Ukraine, or should we think about protecting our borders?
Yeah.
You know, and that's a big political thing. And actually, there should not be much trouble. But the irony of all this is we don't have any money. We have zero. We're fighting over something we don't have, and yet the people will accept the monopoly money and play these games. And as long as there's a trust in that money, but how can they last trusting a system like this? Or, you know, the media is getting into some difficulty, but they're really not. I mean, this should destroy mainstream media. So, but that doesn't seem to happen. And I think if people did concentrate on the right thing, you're arguing about who should get the money. Should Ukraine get it, or should we beef up our borders? Well, that shouldn't be too difficult. But even that would be solved if we'd had a proper policy on the borders. I mean, how did it happen just a couple of years ago? All of a sudden, 1 million people walked in. I call it an invasion. So, and we have a right to be protected against an invasion.
Well, Tony Blinken, he was interviewed about the death of Navalny. He had a lot to say. Let's put on that audio clip, the video clip. Now, don't start playing it quite yet, because I want to read the caption if we can. This is a tweet by a Twitter account that does geopolitics. DD Geopolitics said, "Funny how Blinken is more concerned about a Russian dying in a Russian prison than an American dying in a Ukrainian prison." Let's listen to what he has to say. We'll play the whole thing here.
Fear of one man
Put that
only underscores the weakness and rot at the heart of the system that Putin has built. Russia's responsible for this. We'll be talking to the many other countries concerned about Alexei Navalny, especially if these reports bear out to be true.
Russia's responsible, but we don't know if the reports bear out.
Wait for the evidence. No evidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Just control of those.
Not a word about Gonzalo. And someone you might know did have a tweet that got a lot of attention, I have to say. I very rarely put my tweets up because they're a bit spicy for this. But it turns out, Dr. Paul, that Navalny's wife was at the Munich Security Conference over the weekend, giving a speech. And I said, what an amazing coincidence that Navalny's wife happened to be attending the Munich Security Conference this weekend, giving her a world stage just at the right moment. Wow. So who knows? Could just be a big coincidence. Nevertheless, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Time marches on, and so do the wars.
I wanted to mention one thing, though. You know who else no one's talking about is the treatment of another journalist called Julian Assange. No one talks about that. We do, and a few of our friends do. But here's something interesting about Navalny. So, actually put this next one out. Now, this is just from Wikipedia. This is a normal entry about Navalny, and it said, at the same time, in 2005, Navalny started another youth social movement named DA, Democratic Alternative. Now, this ended up being a political party. This is his organization. So he started, according to Wikipedia, he started Democratic Alternative. Well, here's one of the reasons maybe why they hate Assange so much. Because go to the next clip. This is something that WikiLeaks released way back before Assange was arrested. This is an embassy cable from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow back to the main state in Washington, D.C. In it is a guide to Russian political youth groups. Okay, now this is the cable. Remember, Navalny started Democratic Alternative. Go to the next clip. This is from that classified cable. Da, Maria Gaidar, daughter of Prime Minister Yegor Gaidar, leads Democratic Alternative. Remember, founded by Navalny. She's ardent in her promotion of democracy, but realistic about the obstacles she faces. She said DA is focused on nonpartisan activities. She has received funding from the National Endowment for Democracy, a fact she does not publicize for fear of appearing compromised by an American connection. Now, I would just put out, Dr. Paul, what if we started an American NGO that became a political party and they found out that we were funded by the Russian government, which is what Navalny's party was funded by the American government? I'm not saying anyone deserves to go to jail, but this is something that you won't hear talked about in the mainstream media, that he was funded by the U.S.
There seems to be some powerful forces that are propagandizing against us, no doubt.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next topic, because a little bit better news here. Our friends over at Responsible Statecraft, who often do some very good work, they commissioned a poll, and it's very interesting. It's not good news for Biden. According to a new poll, nearly 70% of Americans want talks to end the war in Ukraine. Now go to the next one here. This tells you a little bit about it. It says roughly 70% of Americans want the Biden administration to push Ukraine toward negotiated peace with Russia as soon as possible, according to a new Harris poll, Quincy Institute poll. The survey shows a 9-point jump in the poll from late 2022. In that poll, 57, so still a majority, said they want it. But now 7 out of 10 respondents to the poll say, Biden, you need to push Ukraine into talks to end this war.
Good luck, huh?
Yeah.
But if we weren't there, it would happen.
Yeah.
How did they get into this mess?
Yeah.
It's because, well, it was because of our policy in NATO. But that's still very unpopular to say that in this country. You're unpatriotic if you said we participated and NATO participated in precipitating this crisis. And until people are willing to go down and get the information, yet they're still, with these, we get these polls, but then it took a long time. Just how long it take people to wake up about the Kennedy assassination,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's, he's writing everything on, we got to give this money, we got to give this money, we got to give him the $60 billion. And in the meantime, his voting base is saying, no, we don't want to send the money. We're against sending the money. It's the same thing that he's doing with Israel. He's giving them a blank check, and poll after poll shows Americans are sick of it. They don't want any more money. They don't want any more support to Israel in the majority. So I don't know what his plans are for getting reelected. Maybe he'll kind of do the same thing he did last time, wink, wink, but it's just amazing how he's seems incapable of reading his base.
Well, who knows what's the real consequence going to be. Maybe it's only speeding up good news in the end, because maybe we will lose our stature where we can't pretend that we own the world.
Yeah, that would be something.
But that's unpatriotic. Don't deal in accuracy in what's going on.
Yeah. Well, the last thing we wanted to do, a good friend of ours, Ray McGovern, who we admire an enormous amount, very, very active. Talk about someone who's been on the scene for a long time. He was the CIA briefer to President Kennedy. You were talking about Kennedy today. He was Kennedy's briefer for the CIA, and he's still active. He's a great anti-war voice. He's been arrested many, many times for challenging the neocons, for not being quiet, refusing to shut up. But he sent us an article, and I put that one up, that he authored for Consortium News, which is another website that I highly recommend. Throwing good money after bad in Ukraine, ? Now you'll find this on consortiumnews.com. It's a very good article. It's a good counter to the continuing neocon articles and neolib articles saying we've got to send them $60 billion. We sent them $100 billion, but they need another $60 billion. This is a very good argument against that.
I can't even imagine how fast they have to run those printing presses. Don't they get mixed up at times? Yes, all the time. Yeah. Nobody knows nobody counts it after it goes out the door.
Yeah. Well, here's a funny little tidbit before we close it down, though. Even Politico, which is a pro-war voice, it's a pro-neocon foreign policy voice in D.C., even Politico admits that this money is not going to change anything, but we still have to send it. Put these two clips up. This is from the Politico article. Many politicians and officials used the moment to press that Ukraine would lose the war without the $60 billion more in U.S. military aid currently awaiting a vote in the House. But they also sounded far from certain about what a victory might look like for Ukraine, even with the boost. Now go to the next one. Here's another clip. Many sidestepped the question of what a Ukrainian victory would look like or when it might happen. Senator Mark Warner, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said the aid package would be a game changer for Ukraine, but he declined to say that the support would ensure a Ukrainian triumph, simply stating that American assistance was Kiev's last best hope. So even the biggest cheerleaders for this money, Dr. Paul, have no idea and in fact are skeptical that it's going to do anything. So tell that to the taxpayer.
See, the way I understand that, it won't make any change in that area, but there will be consequences.
Yeah.
And there will be changes. I think the American power that they depend on that with the empire is going to be diminished. It already is. And also that our national security is going to be, more threatened. So there will be changes. There's always a cost, and they work very, very hard. And people who have a lot of control, more power than just money, but if they have the power, they do get the money, and they'll do it. Fighting for it, they know there's a little contest. We have to do this and this. It's sort of a big game. But once they're there, boy, they don't want to lose a penny, and they will do anything to maintain that position. That's why if you look at the support for the various candidates, it's not done on issues. It's done on who's likely to win? Will you take care of me? And will you help me get elected? And all that crappy stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see what happens. I'm going to close out our Monday show by thanking the audience once again and asking you again to please hit like and to follow the channel if you're not following it already. Try to get others to follow it as well. We certainly appreciate that. Helps us grow the channel. And over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. I've made a point in this program that we want to know more, have more information if we want to make a better decision on what to do. Of course, it's easy to know what to do. We ought to just mind our own business. But if you are determined to give money out and you want to know what's going on, we need more information, and yet we don't have it. And the American people should demand that. I mean, how do you think we went out of our minds over COVID? It was disinformation, and yet the people who didn't want to go along with the people that were preaching the wrong type of science, they're the people who were the enemies of the medical care. So it's a system that depends on telling the truth, and we lack that now, and people want to hear the truth. On long term, they recognize it. On short term, they're keeping their fingers crossed and maybe say, well, I know this program is not good, but if I can get that last check, then I'll be okay. But it'll end. There are some powers behind what the politicians do. The politicians become victimized, and then the people they rule over become their victims. And this type of artificial evil prosperity that we circulate and use it for power doesn't last forever. It can last way too long, and a lot of people die and suffer. But one of our goals is try to catch the trends. Are they doing this? Why are they doing it? Why do you have to do it? This is what happened. This is what happened in Vietnam. This is what happened in Korea. This is what happened in the Mideast wars. And why do you keep doing it? And this is why it's wonderful to meet people like Ray McGovern. To me, it was wonderful to meet the pathologist that refused to buy into the pathology reports of the assassination of Kennedy. And yet, he was ignored for a long, long time. So truth wins out in the end, but there's a lot of effort that you have to put into it, and a lot of people suffer because they do that. And a lot of people pretend they're suffering because they're telling the truth. And that is not an easy job, but that's all about human nature. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.